So, welcome back. Today is Tuesday, February 6th, and this is day number 10 of 33 in the video challenge. So, today I wanted to talk about, the next part of the hot mess in New York, which was that my credible holding position wasn't coming together the way that I expected that it would. And as you may recall, that I had made 2 trips to New York and worked and presented things to my mentor and worked things out with the chairman of the department to have this visiting scholar position for a year so that I could use that as a door opener, but also to have access to a library and to be doing something that still seemed academically reasonable should I want to get back into my academic work, which is what I fully expected was going to happen. So when I got to New York and I wasn't getting an answer from either person, I think in retrospect that this is a really good time to talk about the lens that we see things through. So, at the time that this happened, I already knew some things about the relationship between these 2 individuals, and that was a bit fraught. And so part of me felt like, I'm stuck in a tension that's a somewhat impaired professional relationship. And I didn't want that to be in my way, but I also didn't want to antagonize either side of that equation. And so it wasn't really clear to me exactly how to move. And I think that is what Brene Brown calls being high-centered out of her Texas background, but like where I just felt a little stuck about how to proceed. The other thing that I realized, though, too, was that I'd come through a really hard year and a time in which I wasn't trusting some of my own perceptions. And because a professional relationship that I had valued was unraveling in an albeit somewhat secretive way, but I didn't see all of that happening. And I was paying a price for it. And so I didn't really know how to trust what other people said, and also what my assessment of what they said was. So I think this was difficult in terms of how to evaluate the way that things were coming unglued and what I could do about it. And the other contributor to that was that I'd been in long-term psychotherapy, and a lot of these things had developed, the condition of my life had developed in that context. And so even a resource that I had used generously in my life to help reflect on my personal experience of things and ways that my history colored all of that, I wasn't feeling so good about paying somebody for their opinion, especially when I had to explain the dynamics of the workplace and what the implications were of this. I mean, that's still important, I guess, but I just didn't see that. So the point of all of this is that it seems like I could create a reality because of how I was perceiving things or unable to perceive things. The lens that I was looking through certainly could have been affecting what possibilities there were available to me that I didn't see in trying to resuscitate this particular opportunity. Now, if anyone said to me at that time that we create our reality or that the universe is a mirror for us, I would have been like, yeah, okay, that's great. I don't really have time for that. And it didn't really make sense to me. It seemed sort of like magical thinking. But in another way, kind of practically speaking, when we have something fixed in our thinking or we're haunted by an old experience that then is predisposing us to relate to a current experience in one way or another, then the universe does look like what we're imagining or projecting on the outside. So maybe that's a more practical interpretation of that. And likewise, the sense of the universe opening up and delivering things to us, having certain synchronicities that are in time with things that we want and need, that also sounds kind of like a lot of hooey to many people who are scientifically based. But I like the way that neurosurgeon James Doty talks about this in his book, Into the Magic Shop, that there's a certain way that when we have something in our mind, we get attuned to it, and then it's not necessarily that we attract things that are in sync with that to ourselves, but it might be that we're more likely to hear about them, respond to them, relate to them. So he would liken it to the fact that we're attuned to our own name. And so if we're in a crowded room, a cocktail party or something, and you hear your name from across the room, you might hear that penetrating through the noise of the conversation that's going on around you in a different way. Well, the same could be true about opportunities or about negative self-impressions. So I want to take this opportunity to say, over the years, I've reflected a lot on the lens that I'm looking through and what tools are available to me to both become aware of the lens and to have a different lens, a different frame in order to interpret the events that are going on, to see what my options are. And you may have this too. And in fact, I would say that in a certain way, doctors do create the unpleasant reality that we're dealing with in terms of our relationship with corporate healthcare or industrial healthcare. And I would also go on to say, and this probably merits a conversation just by itself. In fact, I'm sure it does, but I'll say a little bit about it here. That in a certain way, because we have to deal with, so that's a funny sentence because I'm going to say in a certain way we have to deal with uncertainty. But it is true that we come up against problems of such magnitude or such sadness or such devastation sometimes that we can feel insignificant, or like what we bring to the table isn't enough to address or resolve those things in the ways that we would like. And in a certain way, we might have strategies for warding off the discomfort of that reality that involve seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance. And so you can hear this in surgeons a lot when we talk about the worst case ever, where we're pitting ourselves, our skills, our ingenuity against the poor protoplasm of a patient. Well, there's truth in that, but the residue, what's the ash, what's left over from this idea about, and maybe failure to be more aware of or have other ways of processing some of these experiences, is that we can start to see ourselves as helpless or as victims of a system that in fact depends on us for the business that it's conducting. I mean, not exclusively, and they try to get around that increasingly in some ways now by employing ancillary staff to do the jobs that doctors do. But that doesn't work out quite right. There are places where maybe that works, but there are also some problems with that we're all aware of. So my question for today's conversation is, what lens are you looking through when something looks impossible to you? Is there a way that you're projecting some of your own unresolved issues onto the outer world, or in a way that resonates with something that's in the outer world that ends up reinforcing a sense of your own inability to move? And what I'll tell you in the next video is that I just started to look for other opportunities, and a very amazing opportunity came up. And it's part of why I didn't pursue some of the more complicated work options that I had generated right away and talked about in the video before the last one. So I guess that was in video 8. Okay, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. So food for thought. What's the lens that we're looking through, and how is it shaping our experience? See you soon.